Notes that regular staff were out there collecting receivables. Within 5 months, the crisis was averted, and the turnaround was a total success.
It's an incredible win.
So Francisco is riding high. He's proven his search fund thesis works in the mud. He's ready to launch his own fund. But this is where the story takes a massive left turn. He puts his own ambitions on hold because an MBA classmate approaches him to partner on founding a green steel plant project in Brisbane called Future Forge Works.
It is an absolute mammoth pivot. I mean, going from stabilizing a small B2B service company into launching a complex, heavy industry infrastructure project from scratch. But the allure is understandable. It's a chance to build something monumental.
They grind for 2 intense years. They lock down the real estate, navigate the labyrinth of environmental permits, and build an airtight business case that they pitch to over 50 international funds and potential partners. They create massive, tangible value.
They did everything right on paper.
But as we established right at the start of this deep dive, Francisco ultimately had to walk away from a $600 million project with zero equity. Nothing. The downfall wasn't the market or the product. It was a complete breakdown of trust with his partner, who was making unauthorized agreements and feeding investors a reality that simply didn't exist.
Yeah, when a founding partnership fractures at that foundational level of trust, the entire enterprise becomes toxic. Francisco realized his family was absorbing the collateral damage. His wife was essentially solo parenting their 3 kids while he was consumed by a partnership built on quicksand. Stepping away was just a matter of personal survival.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The part that absolutely blows my mind is the legal reality of his exit. His partner had structured the Future Forge Works shareholder agreement to give himself total unilateral control. When Francisco left, his shares just vanished.
Just poof.
How does a guy who literally built his career running complex M&A integrations, tearing apart vendor contracts, and protecting corporate assets allow a shareholder agreement to just wipe him off the cap table?
Because of the single most dangerous blind spot in early-stage business, the assumption of good faith based on a personal relationship. This was his MBA classmate, you know?
Right.
When you are 2 friends sketching out a massive vision on a whiteboard, the absolute last thing you want to do is sit down with aggressive lawyers and negotiate adversarial clauses about what happens if you end up hating each other.
But what are the actual mechanics of that? Like, how does equity legally just dissolve?
Usually it comes down to a few standard mechanisms that naive founders agree to without understanding the weaponized potential. The partner likely structured the board so he had majority voting control. From there, he could have implemented a repurchase right embedded in the bylaws.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
This means if a founder ceases to be an active employee, even if they are driven out by the other partner, the company has the right to buy back their unvested shares for fractions of a penny. Or, if Francisco didn't insist on standard anti-dilution protections, the partner could simply issue 1 billion new shares to himself, mathematically reducing Francisco's ownership to virtually zero.
Oh, man.
Francisco had all the M&A diligence skills in the world, but he didn't apply them to his own co-founder because the friendship clouded his judgment.
A brutal, incredibly expensive lesson. Diligence isn't just for the companies you buy, it's for the people you partner with. So Francisco is back at square one. Unemployed, no equity, and a family to support. But he still has that highly specialized toolkit. He taps back into his search fund network, and this leads him to his second major turnaround.
Right. Another small to mid-sized Brisbane company actually operating in a very similar industry to the first one he saved. And true to form, because a distressed small business doesn't have a spare $100,000 laying around to pay a premium consultant, Francisco takes the job with no upfront pay.
Wait, really? Nothing up front?
Nothing. He works on contingency, meaning he only gets a payout on the back end if he successfully saves the patient.
But the pathology of this company was totally different. It wasn't a sudden, acute working capital crisis caused by a malicious seller. It was a slow, grinding, systemic decline. The business had shrinking margins. They had zero automation. I mean, we were talking 100% manual data entry processes.
Which is crazy in this day and age.
Total nightmare. The owner was completely disconnected from the daily financial realities, and worst of all, they were severely over-leveraged with bank debt.
A slow bleed is often harder to fix than a sudden shock because the complacency is just baked into the company culture. Francisco had to immediately shock the system. Day one, he implements a strict 13-week cash projection.
Which sounds intense.
It is. This isn't just an accounting exercise. It is looking at every single dollar entering and exiting the building over the next quarter. He audited their expenses and immediately ruthlessly cut software licenses and tools that no one was actively using. In a turnaround, cash isn't a metric, it is literal life support.
That gets the bleeding under control internally, but he still has to face the external threats, primarily the banks. And I have to ask you about this negotiation strategy.
Yeah.
Walking into a bank when you are bleeding cash, heavily over-leveraged, and asking for a break sounds completely irrational.
It definitely goes against our instincts.
It's like walking into a lion's den wearing a pork chop suit, or walking into a casino telling the pit boss you are flat broke and demanding they stake your next hand. How do you possibly convince a bank to give you more time and better terms when you can't even pay what you owe today?
This raises an important question about how we view financial institutions. We project human emotions onto banks. We think they want to punish failing businesses, but banks are strictly rational entities driven entirely by recovery math and their own balance sheets. Okay.
Francisco knew that if he walked in begging for mercy, they would shut him down. So he didn't beg. He brought a mathematical proof.
What does that proof look like in the room?
It's the math of liquidation versus restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
He laid out the hard numbers. He said, look, if you force us into liquidation today, you have to fire the staff, hold a fire sale for our used desks and old equipment, and maybe you recover 20 cents on the dollar for the massive debt we owe you.
Which is a terrible outcome for the bank.
Exactly. You take an 80% loss, which looks terrible for your loan officers. However, if you grant us a grace period and extend our terms, here is my 13-week cash flow projection, proving that this underlying asset will generate enough cash to pay you back 100 cents on the dollar, plus ongoing interest.
Wow.
He made it perfectly clear that killing the company was the worst possible financial outcome for the bank itself. You essentially trap them with their own self-interest. You prove that your survival is the most lucrative asset they have. That is fascinating. And he applied a similarly rational win-win approach to his critical suppliers, right? He owed them money, but he needed them to keep shipping materials so the company could actually operate and generate revenue.
Yes, exactly. He went to the suppliers and negotiated a deal where they would extend credit and keep the materials flowing. But in exchange, Francisco signed a binding 2-year exclusivity agreement at their current pricing.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, he gave up the future ability to shop around for cheaper materials, but he gained the immediate breathing room he needed to survive today. The supplier locks in 2 years of guaranteed revenue, and the company gets to live another day.
Now, I want to push back on his strategy with the employees in this second turnaround. The transcript says that instead of doing the classic private equity move, walking in and firing 30% of the staff to immediately cut costs, he repositioned them. He took loyal staff who were doing redundant manual tasks and put them into frontline revenue-generating roles like sales and collections.
Right.
But wait, you're telling me that employees who are terrified the company's going under, who are used to quiet data entry jobs, are suddenly going to be enthusiastic, effective salespeople.
Exactly. It shifts them from being passive victims of a failing company to active participants in its rescue. Desperation, when properly directed, is an incredibly powerful motivator.
And it worked. The playbook proved successful again, which sparked a much larger vision for Francisco. He recognized a massive systemic gap in the market. Small and mid-sized businesses hit these entirely fixable crises all the time, but they don't have the upfront liquidity to hire a high-end turnaround specialist.
It's a huge problem out there.
He is currently exploring models to systematize this rescue process for smaller companies, perhaps by taking equity in the businesses he saves instead of charging consulting fees.
Which brings a lot of these lessons full circle. The mechanisms of survival aren't locked behind a corporate paywall. They just require a specific mindset and rigorous application.
So what does this all mean? What are the concrete takeaways from Francisco's journey that actually apply to you, the listener? For me, it comes down to 3 operational truths. First, the legal fine print is the reality of your business. Optimism and friendship are not legally binding. Always protect your equity with aggressive diligence, even with your best friend.
Spot on.
Second, cash flow isn't just an accounting term you check once a month. It is the physical oxygen of your operation. If you aren't managing a rolling 13-week cash projection, you are flying blind. And third, transparency is a strategic weapon. When things go wrong, your network of clients, suppliers, and employees can act as a safety net, but only if you bring them into the math early enough to help.
Those are the precise tactical lessons. But Francisco's larger vision leaves us with a provocative macro question to mull over.
What's that?
Think about the broader economy. If the primary reason small and mid-sized businesses collapse isn't because of a flawed product or lack of market demand, but simply because they hit a fixable cash timing gap and can't afford a specialist to negotiate their debt, how much incredible innovation, institutional knowledge, and local economic value is quietly disappearing every single day purely for a lack of basic financial triage.
That is a staggering thought.
Right. And more importantly, if Francisco's model works, what scalable systems could we build to stop that bleeding?
It fundamentally changes how you look at a struggling business. It's not just a line on a resume, and it's not a lost cause. It's a mechanical system.
Hmm.
And when the vital signs start dropping, you don't need a perfectly planned itinerary. You need someone who knows exactly how to get in the mud, reroute the plumbing, and breathe life back into the machine. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.